worldwide interweb, as they say. Okay, there we go. Now, good morning. Good morning to you. We're glad that you're here, and it's the Dan Fagan Show, broadcasting on KOAN, KVNT, streaming live on danfagan.us. Our telephone number, 569-1080, 569-1080. 7 degrees outside right now in Anchorage, 3 degrees out in Palmer, 1 in the valley, Eagle River 7, Girdwood 12 degrees. Still that cold, frigid air is hanging with us and is a part of our day here in the South Central Alaska. Our number 569-1080, 569-1080. We're glad that you found us. We've got a big show for you today. Lots to get to. Alan Boras, I think is the way you pronounce his name. He's a professor down at the Kenai Peninsula. Pretty hardcore left of center guy, and he will be joining us today. Wrote a column a couple days ago in the Anchorage, Alaska Dispatch News that caught my attention. I asked him if he'd come on. He said he would. So he'll be joining us. Also, our good friend Keith Montauk, who's on the board over at the Veterans Armed Services YMCA, and Buddy Wood, who's executive director out there. He'll be on with us talking about veterans issues and other things like that. And, of course, we'll take your phone calls, 569-1080, 569-1080. It's so funny to watch the folks out in the Northeast freak out over a few inches of snow. Big story everywhere. All the networks are covering it as though it's a major deal. It's just a typical storm for us here in Alaska. The one we just had, I guess the snow we had a couple of days ago really is pretty comparable to what they're getting. Initially they were forecasting, feet of snow, but it never comes out. Those of us who live in Alaska know when the weather people tell you it's going to be 12 inches, it's not going to be 12 inches. Very unlikely. Typically they tend to shoot high and get low. And it's the same. It's the same. Here's the headline, Syracuse.com, Syracuse, New York. Snow totals won't be as bad as forecast. Really? Yeah, that's pretty much the way it goes. Welcome to our world. Tens of millions of people along the East Coast hunkered down for a storm that, for most part, failed to live up to predictions. Yeah. There you go. How many times has that happened here in Alaska? They were calling this the storm of the century, too. I don't know what it is about snow. That I tried to have a guy with the National Weather Service explain this to me, and he acknowledged that it's very difficult to predict and to forecast how many inches of snow are going to fall with any given storm because you just don't know what the storm's going to do. If the storm stalls, then you're going to get dumped on. If it moves quickly, you're not going to get much. If it kind of goes through regularly, and you just can't predict that kind of thing. You don't know what the storm's going to do. So it's very difficult for those guys to predict what's going to go on. As long as I've lived in Alaska now, when I hear major snowstorm, 13, 16, 20 inches predicted, I take it with a grain of salt because I like snow. I like lots of snow. I like to see the snow come down and just blanket us. Maybe it's because I don't have to shovel my own driveway, but I just love the snow. And so I'm always wanting more snow, and I get excited when they say we're going to get dumped on, but it never happens. It hardly ever happens. The one major time that snow really affected my life was I was out of the country, and it was in the St. Patrick's Day snowstorm, and I don't remember the year, but we literally it was a record. It was a record. And I parked my car at the airport in the international terminal where there's no covering. And I'm telling you, there was so much snow in my car. I couldn't find my car. Literally, the car was just complete. And I flew in just right after the storm. And it was a disaster. I had to call a friend, and he helped me get out. It was just a disaster trying to get that car back on the road again. So that's really my only time snow's ever really adversely affected me, other than the driving conditions. And I don't know what it is about Alaskans. It's not that, my goodness, you just slow down, you don't gun it. Don't get too close to the car in front of you. Just keep in mind it's slick, it's slippery and slick. Like today, it's very slick out there. And I would think that by now we'd be used to that, right? So I don't know. It's just one of the things that those of us here in Alaska who've lived here any period of time at all, we don't get too excited or get our get all worried and afraid that, oh, what are we going to do? All the snow's coming. But the people in the Northeast, they'll learn someday. 569-1080, 569-1080. As I said, we're going to talk to Alan Boris, columnist with the Alaska Dispatch News. Alan is a pretty hardcore left-wing guy. He's about as left as they get. And of course, we'll obviously, it'll be a civil discussion, and we'll treat him with dignity and respect him. But I really am trying to focus on getting more people on the broadcast who disagree with me, and just try to, let them have their say, but try to figure out, well, how could they possibly believe this? And Alan's, he's a big anti-Pebble guy. I think one of the questions we'll ask him, I know you love Mother Earth and all that, but what about people who live in Western Alaska who literally have no ability to go out and get a job? They want to remain in their area of the state. They like their lifestyle. They enjoy living in the villages. They like the subsistence, fish and hunt. Why would you try to block something that would give them the opportunity to still enjoy their lifestyle, still live where they want to live, but then also be able to get a job and have their kids get jobs and have their grandkids get jobs and let them literally plant themselves there? And of course, with economic growth comes infrastructure. You're going to see more roads out there. You're going to see more bridges out there. You're going to see more stores and banks and other things. And, that's how it works. And to say, well, we think it's possible that Pebble may destroy the environment, even though we really haven't heard Pebble's plan and we don't know exactly what they're going to do, it just doesn't make sense to me. So we'll ask Alan about that and give him an opportunity to explain to us why he believes we should just shut Pebble down without even allowing the Pebble Partnership Company to go out and at least tell us what it wants to do. Dan Fagan here, 569-1080, 569-1080. Time currently 6:14. 6:17 in the morning. Good morning to you. Good morning to you here on a Monday morning, January 27th, 2014. It's the Dan Fagan Show, broadcasting on KOAN, KVNT, also streaming live, danfagan.us. Temperatures in single digits today. Aren't going to get much higher, so lots of chilly weather. Couple of overnight crimes last night and the night before. This is bizarre. The night before, so this would have been Sunday night. Anchorage police arrested a 14-year-old. 14 for shooting an 18-year-old at a drugstore over on Tudor. This was Sunday night. They've not released the suspect's name. He's just a kid, 14. Police responded to a report of an apparent shooting victim in the area of Lake Otis and Tudor just after 8:30 Sunday night. Two groups of teens were hanging out, including the suspects and the victim. They agreed to meet at Walgreens in the area for a drug deal. According to Nita Shell, during the transaction, the suspect and the victim got into an altercation that ended when the suspect produced a gun and fired at once, striking the victim, who was sitting in a vehicle. It happened in the parking lot. Police have not said what the drug was that was being sold. Police say the drugs are illegal and they aren't for sale at any store, including Walgreens, and they shouldn't be sold on the street. It causes issues like this. The guy who was shot, Charles Gustav Steiferpert III, was taken to the hospital where he died 20 minutes later. Police originally reported the victim was 16, but he was 18. 14 years old. A Walgreens manager directed questions to the company's corporate office. How do you get to the place where you're 14 and you have a gun and you're out making drug deals?
That's most kids out there these days.
That's most kids?
No, but there's a lot of kids out there that they've just grown up way too fast, and there's been gangs ever since the 90s and 80s, and it's just as bad now.
If the judge that the defendant could be, let's see, maybe I lost my place here. District Attorney Clint Campion said the laws for prosecuting young defendants 16 and older as adults comes with more control. Alleged offenders younger than 16 can face charges as adults too, though what is known as a discretionary waiver. A judge determines if the juvenile might be open to treatment, amendable to treatment. There's potential to try as an adult. If a judge finds the opposite, the defendant can remain under supervision of the Juvenile Justice Division at age 20. I know in New Orleans, where young teenage crime is a major problem, and what happens there is the gang members, who sometimes are older than 18, sometimes they're not, but they'll recruit the 13, 14, 15-year-old kids to do more of the violent crime, knowing that the punishment is less severe and it's not as consequential on your overall record because you're juvenile and it does not carry over to your adult record. And they use that loophole, if you will, to as they go out and commit violence and fight their turf wars. That's part of the strategy. We need a 14-year-old to go out and do something really risky, shoot somebody or whatever, because even if he's caught, he'll get less severe punishment, and once he's 18, it'll be like a fresh start. So they use that as a tool in New Orleans, where there are more gangs than people, frankly. and it's something that these kids know. They understand it. And I don't know if that was the case here Sunday night. I mean, gangs are gangs. They're the same everywhere. New Orleans has a much larger gang problem, but I know Anchorage, as long as I've been covering crime in Anchorage, which is several years ago, I know that there were gangs here. And it's sad because, you have a kid who's 13, 14, 15, no dad, never really seen a man. His daddy probably left, lives in a single lives with this mom who's single. She could be on drugs, or maybe she's a good woman. She works 2 jobs, but she's just never home because she has to support the boy, and there's no there's no example for the young man other than his buddies that he runs with on the street corner, or listening to rap music where they talking about cap your ass and stuff like that. And so it's a tough life. I'm not in any way, shape, or form trying to justify what this 14-year-old kid did, but I would imagine his starting point in life is very different than yours and mine. And then, of course, last night, another shooting, another killing. One person dead, another hospitalized, life-threatening injuries following a shooting in East Anchorage. This is last night. This was about 3:30 in the morning in an apartment building in the 6,000 block of East 41st Court near Tudor Road. Male victim died at the scene. They have not released his name or age. Female victim was taken to the hospital with life-threatening injuries. Police are not saying much more, whether they have a suspect in custody or not. So it's been a couple of tough nights here in Anchorage. I don't know if it's the severe cold weather or what. It's just a part of life. It's always going to be my concern. As someone who spent a lot of time covering crime, and I have, as a reporter, I've probably spent more time covering crime in really bad neighborhoods. Now, this is before I got to Alaska, than anything else that I've covered. I suppose I covered a lot of politics, and I did a lot of investigative reporting. But the bulk of my early reporting career focused on crime. And there are a lot of different theories about what causes crime. Some people say it's because we live in a racist culture and that minorities have no choice but to commit crimes, otherwise they starve. Because the white man, he oppresses them, and the man keeps them down, and so you got to go out and rob this liquor store, otherwise you can't eat because no one will hire you. That's what some people honestly, legitimately believe. And if you give more people free money, they will commit less crime. Obviously, that's ridiculous. Crime is a matter of the heart. I would say that 99% of people on this globe who live in poverty would never dream of stealing something from you or shooting you. So the idea that poverty causes crime it's an idea I just reject. I would say crime causes poverty. Because when you have a neighborhood and there are people in that neighborhood who have no regard for your property or your life, then that neighborhood begins to dry up with opportunity. Are you going to go in and open a brand new restaurant in a neighborhood where there's drug deals on every corner? Why would you? Are you going to go in and open up a clothes store or an electronics store or whatever kind of business? If you know the neighborhood's not safe, of course not. So when the crime begins to escalate in the neighborhood, then the businesses begin to leave. There's an exodus. And then, if you live in the neighborhood, there's nowhere to work because all the businesses left because it's not safe. And you end up getting a place where it's just run by the drug dealers. And the people in the neighborhood become afraid. And this is something I've experienced many times firsthand. They will not talk to you. They can have a front row seat of a murder in their front yard of two drug dealers, and they will not say a word to police because the drug dealers run the neighborhood. And if they do identify the drug dealer, then they'll have to testify. And then, that's trouble. So it's a mess and it's a problem. You ask me what the answer is. It's change the hearts. Convince people, these folks really just have no hope. To live that type of lifestyle where you're going to be a drug dealer, most of them know they're going to die young. You talk to most gangbangers today, they pretty much have come to the conclusion that one of two things will happen to them. They will be shot and die young, or they'll spend the rest of their lives in jail. And they have resigned themselves to that fact. That's their reality. Well, that's what happens to everybody around me. Why would I be different? And if someone in the neighborhood does decide to apply themselves and get good grades and try to assimilate in society, they're called a sellout, or you're an Uncle Tom or whatever, and they're rejected by the people in the neighborhood. Oh, you think you're better than us? It's a very bad situation, and it's almost a peer pressure situation. We see this in the villages a lot. It's a culture. A culture arises that's destructive, and it breeds more of what that culture values, which is hopeless. 629, Dan Fagan here, 569-1080. 569-1080. We're streaming danfagan.us. 25 minutes ahead of 7 o'clock. Dan Fagan Show here on KOAN, KVNT. So glad you're here. Our telephone number 569-1080, 569-1080. We are streaming live, danfagan.us. Glenn Beagle has just announced this on his Facebook page, and I wanted to make you aware of it myself. We're very excited here on KOAN to have Glenn Beagle beginning Monday hosting the Glenn Beagle Show, 4 to 6 in the afternoon, Monday through Friday, right here on KOAN. Glenn Beagle, 4 to 6. We're also going to have Joe Miller on the station from 2 to 4. So it'll be me and Joe Miller and Glenn Beagle all on KOAN. And I believe there's going to be another program change, but I that's not official yet as far as I know. So I won't announce that to you, but it's looking good, the lineup we have here on KOAN, and we're excited. Glenn Beagle's, as most of you know, is a very good friend of mine and someone that I'm just thrilled to be on the same station with. He's just a great guy, very intelligent, very wise. And so you got that to look forward to. You got our show in the morning, then Glenn in the afternoon, and then Joe Miller in between. 569-1080, 569-1080. Obamacare program. $50,000 in taxpayer money for every American who gets health insurance. 50,000. You know, there's these commercials. I was watching a little television last night. It's just so cold. I normally don't watch TV, but it's just so cold. What are you going to do? So I'm watching a little TV, and they've got this healthcare.gov, and they say, come get your free health insurance. Well, guess what, folks? Every person who signs up for that, $50,000 in taxpayer money. This is according to the Congressional Budget Office report. $50,000 per every American who gets health insurance. So every time you see that healthcare.gov, sign up, and they have people there. Oh, I was so worried I didn't have health insurance. Now I feel so much better. $50,000 it cost taxpayers. It's a stunning figure. Government will spend $1.993 trillion over a decade and take in $643 billion in new taxes, penalties, fees related to Obamacare. The $1.35 trillion net cost will result in between 24 million and 27 million fewer Americans being uninsured. A $50,000 price tag per person. Did you hear that? I know that's a lot of numbers, so let me say it for you one more time. This is according to the Congressional Budget Office. This is a nonpartisan government organization. Government will spend $1.993 trillion over a decade and take in $643 billion in new taxes, penalties, and fees related to Obamacare. The $1.35 trillion net cost. That's the net cost. That's how much it will cost, more than what Obamacare brings in. $1.35 trillion. Will result in between 24 million and 27 million fewer Americans being insured. And a $50,000 price tag per person. We still have 29 million non-elderly Americans without medical insurance. We still got 30 million people out there without insurance. And we're going to spend $1.35 trillion on this program, leaving 30 million still uninsured. These numbers assume Obamacare insurance exchange enrollment will double between now and 2025. That's just amazing. Now, if the dishonest, discredited, unethical, left-leaning, agenda-driven, we don't give a damn about the truth media were to report those numbers to you, there would be a wave of outrage that would hit this country. The fact that we're going to spend $1.35 trillion on Obamacare, $50,000 per person price tag, and we're still going to have 30 million people who are non-elderly without medical insurance. That is a fact that you will never read, ever, under no circumstance, in the Alaska Dispatch News. You will never read that. And you wonder how the left gets away with this stuff. Well, we're telling you about it. And there are other places telling you about it. Fox News, which has very high ratings, is telling you about it. Rush Limbaugh with, 20 million listeners, he's telling you about it. So I'm not belly aching here because we're winning the war on information. We're making progress. We're advancing the troops in the war to inform the American people of what is real and what is true. And to me, that is such a clear, it just could not be clearer that Obamacare is a dismal failure. $1.35 trillion we're going to spend. And again, folks, unfortunately, I am not gifted enough to be able to explain to you what $1 trillion is. But I can tell you it is much more than you could possibly dream or think. You know, when you go from $1 to $100 to $1,000 to $1 million to $1 billion to $1 trillion, that billion to trillion level jump, it's not like the 1,000 to million or million to billion. It's so big. And you've heard these things, you know, you take $1 trillion, you could string them around the world 10 times. Oh, yeah, I don't know, all these examples. But I just don't think you can really get a handle on what $1 trillion is. And we're basically going to spend $2 trillion on Obamacare over the next 10 years. And we're still going to have 30 million people uninsured. And most people have no idea. And I'll tell you, this is the good news. Here's some more good news. I like to give you good news. We have a presidential election coming up. And no matter how hard Alice Rogoff and Brian Williams and the folks at 60 Minutes and the New York Times and all these media outlets try to cover up the dismal failure that Obamacare is, we're going to have a number of political candidates on the Republican ticket who are very gifted orators and are going to lay out for the American people facts like the one that I just presented to you. And the American people are going to hear this truth that the media is trying to hide. And that's the beauty of the campaign. That's the beauty of a campaign. It's the reason Mark Begich lost. When the people of Alaska were confronted with Mark Begich's horrific record as a U.S. Senator, something that they'd never read about in the media, then they begin to realize, okay, this guy is a nothing but a servant of Harry Reid and Barack Obama, a lapdog, if you will. And when they realized that, because Mr. Sullivan, running a campaign, pointed it out to them, then Mr. Begich went down in defeat. And so it'll happen again. Don't worry. Obamacare will be revealed for the policy that it is, which is one that is flawed. So do not let your heart be troubled. The American people will see it. They'll realize it. The media won't be able to cover it up. This thing is too much of a disaster. It's like covering up the Titanic. And we're going to see some major changes in Washington, D.C. as a result. That's the good news. 569-1080. 569-1080 is our number. 645 Dan Fagan Show. We're streaming live, danfagan.us. 647, Dan Fagan, broadcasting here on KOAN, KVNT, streaming live, danfagan.us. Very, very cold outside. It's currently 9 degrees at Anchorage, Wasilla 3, Palmer 3, Eagle River 7, Girdwood 12. Our number 569-1080. 569-1080. If you'd like to check us out online, watching the show live, you can do that. Dan Fagan Show at or danfaganshow.us. danfaganshow.us. And you can actually watch the show right there on the fancy internet computer, whatever you got, your smartphone, tablet, any of that stuff. It's easy. It's so easy. And this is something that I'll just share my heart with you a little bit about talk radio. I noticed the other day, let's see, hold on, let me think now. Martin Luther King Jr. Day, that was my first show on the air on KFQD starting in 2003, I believe. 2003. So I've been, and we did a TV show for about a year and a half, and then I took about a year and a half off. So, I haven't been doing it quite 10 years, but close. And I remember I ran into a gal the other day. This is quite a while. And she said, oh, my dad loves talk radio. She asked me what I did. We'd met. And then she didn't know who I was. This was not in Anchorage. And she said, oh, I said, you're a talk show host. I said, yo, how exciting. And she says, my dad loves talk radio, but he only can listen to it for a while. And then he has to take a break from it because it gets him so angry. And I think there's some truth to that. Look, there's some problems in this country, and no one's really talking about them. The fact that so many people are choosing not to work in our country today and instead live off of the fruits of other people's labor, that's a really big deal. And it's not sustainable. And a lot of us are upset about that. The fact that there are some radical agendas that are advancing in our country, the big environmental agenda that seemingly wants us to go back to days where we, just light candles and ride bicycles. The radical gay agenda. I don't know. There are more TV shows. I don't know that there is a TV show on television anymore that doesn't have a couple of gay characters in it. And, that's a big agenda they're trying to push, to try to redefine marriage. So I can go down the list, And a lot of us, we don't want a country. We like America. We like where America is. We like the idea of family values and hard work and self-sufficiency and making your own way and freedom, the freedom to decide for yourself and your family. Not that we want to dictate. Look, if you want to go out and fall in love with someone of the same sex, then you're welcome to it. I've never heard of it, a single person in the conservative movement who would say homosexuality should be illegal or people shouldn't be allowed to get together with whoever they want to get together with. No one's saying that. I would never say that. I would never pass or even think for a second about passing a law to say that you can't be with someone of the same sex. But when you're talking about the institution of marriage, which is the building block of our culture, to say that we're going to redefine it, we're going to change the meaning of it to fit the proclivities of a certain group with certain appetites, that's crazy. That's just crazy. I notice now in the paper, all the media, the leftist media, they've adopted this term marriage equality, trying to promote gay marriage. But that doesn't make sense. You can't have marriage is marriage. Marriage is marriage. If you want to get married, then find someone of the opposite sex and make a covenant with them and get married. That's marriage. There's no marriage equality. Nobody's being prohibited from getting married. Now, if you want to change the definition of marriage to be a man and three women, or a woman and a woman, or a man and a man, or a man and a tree, or whatever, however you want to change the definition of marriage, that's a different issue. But there's no marriage equality. No one's denied the right to marry, because marriage always has been and always will be between a man and a woman. So it's not a marriage equality issue. That's total propaganda. And this is the kind of stuff that I think a lot of Americans are growing very weary of and very angry, because this agenda, this leftist agenda, which says that there are people who are less fortunate than you, and we're going to take some of your money and give it to them because we think they deserve as much as you deserve, even though you sacrificed and worked hard and they've sat on their lazy ass and played video games. That kind of agenda, it's really starting to piss a lot of Americans off. So they're reaching out. They're looking for like-minded people who agree with them, and a lot of that is being presented, that thought, on talk radio. Here you're seeing all this stuff, the TV stations and the Anchorage Daily News or the Alaska Dispatch News and the network news and Hollywood, they all present the leftist agenda as though it's normal and okay. And most Americans are looking at it and going, what? And so they've got no place to go to feel like they're a part of another culture. And then when they turn on talk radio hosts and callers and guests, for the most part, are expressing views that they agree with but never hear. So that's a good thing. Somebody once said that talk radio is America's immune system. I believe in talk radio. It's huge. I can't imagine where this country would be if Rush Limbaugh had not started his show in 1988. And all the other ones in his, who've also been successful. So I understand the importance of talk radio. I'm a part of talk radio. I like talk radio. But it is very concerning to me that talk radio will get to a place where that it gets so negative, and all we do is focus on the negative, and all we do is focus on some of the things I just described in the last 5 minutes, to where it gets us so angry that we begin to lose hope. We begin to say, what's the use? Well, our country's lost. What can we do? I saw Ron Paul the other day talking about maybe it's time to start talking about America's secession. Let's break off into two countries because much of America is lost, he said. And believe me, living in California for the time that I did, there's some problems down there, man. There's some real, those guys are whacked. But I don't believe in that. I believe America is still a nation of destiny, a nation of purpose. It is the greatest country in the history of mankind, and it is salvageable. And here's the key part: it's worth saving. It is worth saving. All the sacrifices our founding fathers went through, all those who fought in the Civil War, all those men and women in uniform who fought in Vietnam, the Korean War, Afghanistan, Iraq, Cold War. So much sacrifice to keep this the greatest nation in the history of mankind moving in the right direction. We're still the freest country on the planet. We're still the greatest country on the planet. And we will win. We will win back our nation from the cancer that is leftism. But we can't focus just on the cancer. Let's focus on the answers, the solutions, the victories. As I said yesterday, we are making some real progress in this nation. When you look at abortion and the death culture, many more Americans now embrace life than used to. When you look at the dissemination of information through the media, Conservatives have a much more of a voice now than they did in the past, and many more people now are exposed to both sides of the story. When you look at education, you look at the move to bring education into an arena where there's competition and choice, that movement is exploding in growth. There are some major victories we're winning. And I would say to you, and I would say to my fellow talk show hosts, let's not forget to document the progress we're making. Yes, there's lots to document in the negative. Yes, it's important that we point out that which needs to be changed. But let's not forget we're winning. And this is still a great country. And I believe with all of my heart, every ounce of my heart, that better days are ahead. I do not believe the 80s under Ronald Reagan were our best days, and from here on, it's downhill. I don't believe that for a second. Look at what happened in the last election. We get a new president. You watch. Dan Fagan, 658. Good morning. 6 minutes past 7 o'clock. Dan Fagan Show right here on KOAN 95.1 FM, 1020 AM, 1080 AM. Sorry. And then out in the valley, we're broadcasting on KVNT 95.2 FM, 1020 AM. We're also streaming live on the big fancy World Wide Web at danfagan.us. danfagan.us. Our number 569-1080. 569-1080. We'd love to talk to you this morning. Give us a call. 569-1080. Email me if you'd like. Dan Fagan Show at iCloud.com. iCloud.com. Fagan, Fagan. Very cold this morning. Temperatures for you: Wasilla 3, Palmer 3, Anchorage 9, Eagle River 7, Girdwood 7. Going to get up to about 12 today in Anchorage, they say, with sunshine. Sunshine's nice. Again, 569-1080, 569-1080. Widespread power outages, as some of you may know, in Anchorage and Eagle River overnight. Although most of the power has been restored. This was all triggered when Chugach Electric Association South Central Power Project tripped offline, removed about 170 megawatts of generating capacity from the rail belt electrical grid, causing the outage. The company brought in additional power generating capability from its Beluga power plant. Said power was restored to most of its customers by 11:30 p.m. last night, though it asked anyone still without power to report outages. No word on the cause yet. One would think the weather may have been a factor, but that's not what the power company's saying. So I'm just speculating there, obviously. Dow Jones average down 354 this morning, down to 17,324. It broke 18,000. 2-3 weeks ago. NASDAQ down 93. The stock market is such a mystery to me. My mother's an expert at it. She's an incredible investor and very wise along those matters, but I have no idea what to make of it. I know that it can pay great dividends if you stick it out and you stay with your investment. You don't panic. I am concerned about the monetary policies employed by the United States government, the spending and borrowing and printing, the $18 trillion debt. I'm told by many who seem to know better than I that I shouldn't panic because the dollar, which is still the most powerful currency on the planet, as long as it remains stronger than other currencies, we'll be okay. So I guess I'll just say, okay. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me that if you keep printing dollars and weakening the value of the dollar by printing more dollars, at some point, that's just going to have to, there's going to be a problem there, isn't it? I mean, I'm not an economist. I'm not a financial expert. We'll have to have our friend Mike Daniels on here maybe next week, have him explain this to us. But if you keep printing and borrowing and spending what you don't have, how is that going to do anything but cause the dollar to be so weak that it loses its value? I do know that every time the government prints a dollar, it's a tax on you and me. Because that dollar you have in your pocket is worth a certain amount. And if they go and print another one, then it's worth less. And if they print another one, then it's worth even less. And they print another one, it's worth even less. Well, we're printing a lot of money right now because we're spending so much more than we take in. And that has to eventually. And another thing, this idea of Wall Street being the beneficiary of the Obama administration, I would agree with that. this president has been a fantastic boom to the very rich. And I shouldn't say very rich, but people who own stocks. Now, some 50% of people own stocks in America. So if you're a stock owner, Obama's been your best friend. You've had the stock market pay 30% dividends in recent years. That's a lot of earnings. Of course, he wants to raise capital gains tax to kind of get back at you. I don't know. I don't know what to think about it all. I'm part of me thinks it would be good just to have a big stock market crash, and we'd go back to having the right value in the market, and that people would who maybe have $3 million in stocks may think that they have $3 million, but in reality, it's more like 300,000 because the stocks aren't really worth $3 million. I don't know. I'm talking way out of my league and way above my pay grade. 569-1080, 569-1080. Give us a call. Let us know what's on your mind. Alan Boris, professor at down on the Kenai Peninsula, is going to join us in a minute. That'll be interesting. Let's go to Tom. Tom, you're on.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Tom.
Speaking of high finance, I believe it was Representative Nagiak from the North Slope was on the radio yesterday on one show, and he was talking about Obama's setting aside Anwar forever, and setting aside part of the Arctic Ocean forever. And he's saying, this is where we live, this is our land, and this is where we're supposed to derive our income from. Speaking of the North Slope people, and when are they going to come out against Obama and just call him a racist? I mean, Jesus, Why would any people allow somebody like President Obama to do that to them and take away their future livelihood? And I was really impressed with the speech. I thought it was very good and right on point that we have a bunch of rabid environmentalists saying, no, we want to set aside that land forever, not considering the fact that a whole bunch of people live there.
Don't tell anybody, but yesterday morning I was watching the House floor on GCI cable. Yeah. And the representative you're speaking of, he got up and actually gave a speech on the floor, and he read it, but it was very powerful, basically saying what you just said.
Yeah, it's just it's amazing to me that Obama just does he really think he's God?
Well, do you think? Let me ask you a question, Dom, and this is a question you will not be able to answer. But is it that he really knows that his environmental base is so huge, and he's just doing it to keep them happy, or does he really believe in this stuff?
Oh, I don't think he believes in anything.
Okay,
I think he's just pandering to one group or another, and he's looking at his legacy.
Yeah,
and saying, what's going to get me remembered for all times. And I think he'll be remembered for all times until we have another president that is worse than him.
Well, I saw Hollis French put on his Facebook page 2 days ago, I love this president. So I think the left will remember him fondly.
Well, that's not saying much for Hollis French, is it?
No, it isn't. Thank you, Tom.
Have a good day. Take care.
Appreciate your call. Dan Fagan Show, 7:14. $7:17 in the morning, Dan Fagan Show, KOAN, KVNT, streaming live, danfagan.us, our number 569-1080. Keith Montanuk will be joining us shortly. He's a mechanic you can trust. He is the owner, operator, president of Specialty Truck and Auto. Keith has a great setup there right across the street from the Long Branch Saloon off of Abbott. He's been helping people with their automobile repairs for years. And again, the main thing is the guy's just trustworthy. Keith Montanuk, Specialty Truck and Auto. His number 569-1080. 569-1080. I was watching a little bit of a committee hearing yesterday. It was Lisa McGuire and John Coghill and Bill Stoltz was up there, and I don't remember who else. They're talking about marijuana laws and how they're going to regulate it, and it's so heartbreaking what to do about edibles, and it's just so heartbreaking. I've do what you want, have fun, whatever. But the bottom line is, and I know though, I hate the distraction of comparing marijuana to alcohol. I know the pro-pot people, all they want to talk about is, well, what about alcohol? What about alcohol? What about alcohol? Well, we're not talking about alcohol. We're talking about pot. We're talking about marijuana. So don't try to distract us with, and I understand it's been settled. The majority of Alaskans think, of course, the campaigns that ran, the ads that ran, I thought they were deceptive. But hey, look, that's people want. They want pot. They want pot to be legal. I understand. It just breaks my heart because I know in the end that this will be a negative for our culture. I know that this will cause more harm than good. And that's my opinion. I could be wrong. But I believe drugs like marijuana, it's no way to go through life. And to say that it's going to be legal and you can buy it and they're going to make cookies and brownies and gummy bears and, you can just you can't tell me more people. Of course, there's going to be more people using pot now. And I'm not trying to legislate morality here. I'm not trying to get people to, follow my set of standards in life. I have many problems. I have many shortcomings. There's plenty of stuff in my life that needs to be gutted out and I shouldn't be doing. I understand that. But when you're talking about public policy, just like I wouldn't want to see a casino downtown in Anchorage. I wouldn't want to, I've gambled. I played poker in a weekly poker game for years. I don't anymore because I get up at this hour now and we played late in the evening. I'm not saying that gambling's bad and, people who gamble, some can control it, some can't. But to bring this stuff into the culture where it's more readily available, I just am looking at it from a practical standpoint, and I just hate to see lives ruined. I hate to see, look, life's so precious. It's so exciting. It's such a thrill. What a great gift life is. Is there a greater gift in life? No. And to bring things into the culture that will take away the joy of life and bring in addiction and people who literally, there's so many people out there, folks, who are literally in prison. They may not be at the Spring Hill Correction Facility, but because of addictions, they are in prison. And I hate to see things introduced into our culture that will cause more people to be addicted. And I understand there's a fine line there. I understand that you can't have this society where, it's like Islam, no pornography, no alcohol, no this, no that. I understand that. I'm not calling for that. I'm all about freedom. But I'm literally just speaking to you from my heart here. It just breaks my heart to think something as destructive as marijuana, as many lives as it has harmed, will become more prevalent. Is that a fair thing to say? Does that make me a prude? Does that make me some kind of anti-freedom person? To say that I believe in my experience, and I've only smoked pot once, and I didn't know it was pot. I thought it was crack. But my experience, what I've seen with my eyes, with people I've worked with, not necessarily people who are friends of mine, but people that I've worked with, I've seen pot take over so many of their lives, where that it became the reason they were living. And I just think that's a shame. I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm not I have no look. Let me just say this right here, right now. If I ever come across as judgmental or I'm better than anybody, let me make it very clear. I'm not better than anybody. I've made more mistakes in my life. I've had more I've made more bad decisions in my life. I could never look down at anybody with the things I've done in my life. So if I ever come across as holier than thou or, oh, I'm better than those people because of this, please don't take what I'm saying that way. No one has made more mistakes with their lives than me. Now, I don't beat myself up over it. I have to keep living, and I have to hold on to the hope and the belief that what has happened in my past is not necessarily going to be repeated in my future if I attempt to change the things I've done wrong and do what's right in the future. That's another beautiful thing about life. Your past is literally irrelevant. Literally. And I don't care how many mistakes I've made in the past, that does not dictate what I'm going to do with my future. And that one key fact of life is what keeps me going. I mean, I'm going to keep pressing toward where I believe I'm supposed to go, keep moving in that direction, keep trying to make changes that I believe I need to make, keep failing, but picking myself up every time I fail. The only way you lose in life is if you quit. It's the only way. It's not if you fail. Everybody fails. Everybody falls down and falls down and falls down. You will continue to fail. You'll continue to fall down. It's what you do afterward. So that's me. That's who I am. I'm a guy. There are a lot of people out there who just kind of sail through life. Everything's so easy. They're so. Glenn Beagle kind of reminds me of this. He's got his act together. Everything's perfect. He just never makes bad decisions. He's just a great guy. Always makes the right decision. And they just sail through life. And everybody admires them. Everybody thinks they're fantastic. That's not me. I am flawed. I know where I'm supposed to go. I know who I'm supposed to be, but I have a hard time getting there. But I'm not going to quit. And I'm going to keep moving in that direction. And the only way I lose is if I quit. So let's just establish that right now for those who listen to this show on a regular basis. I do not think I'm better than anybody. So when I talk about pot and you happen to be someone who your life is pot, I don't think I'm better than you. But I can make the statement and state the fact that I believe if you become addicted to pot and you smoke it every day and you have to smoke it every day, your life is not as fulfilling as it could be because you're deluding yourself, you're medicating yourself, and you're not experiencing life in its fullness. Same with alcohol, same with overeating, same with any kind of medication, gambling, pornography, you name it. So please, please, please understand that this is not about I'm better than anybody. I'm not better than anybody. So when we talk about the pot, and they're talking about it in the session yesterday, and it was the Senate and House Judiciary Committee, they were joint meeting, and it's just it's so heartbreaking. And I'm thinking all the lives, to walk into a store and be able to buy marijuana gummy bears, and that person probably would have never touched anything like that, and then all of a sudden they're addicted to that, and they're missing out on so much life. It's just heartbreaking. That's all I have to say about it. I don't know how we regulate it. I don't know about the logistics of how we introduce this awful drug into our culture. My only thought on it is it's just absolutely heartbreaking. And of all the things that happened, Mark Begich losing was such a big deal for the state and country. Electing Dan Sullivan was such a big deal. But of all the things that happened in the last election, the thing that really hurt the most was that introduction and the mainstreaming of marijuana in our culture here in Alaska. That was the saddest for me. All right, 569-1080. This will be interesting. Professor down in the Kenai College, Professor Alan Morris. This could get interesting. Don't go anywhere. He's next. 569-1080. Fagan Show, 729. All right, 7:35, Dan Fagan Show here, broadcasting on KOAN 95.1 FM in Anchorage, 1080 AM in Anchorage. Also out in the Valley, KVNT 95.2 FM and 1020 AM. We're also streaming live, video and audio, danfagan.us. Our number 569-1080. Email me, Dan Fagan Show. Dan Fagan Show at iCloud.com. Happy to welcome to the broadcast Alan Morales, who is a professor of anthropology at Kenai Peninsula College. Alan, Professor, how are you?
Hello, Dan Fagan. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I appreciate you calling up the broadcast.
Okay,
I wanted to talk to you about a column you wrote yesterday, or I guess it was yesterday. No, it was actually about 3 or 4 days ago.
Saturday.
Yeah, Senator Sullivan. This is the title, the headline. And I know you don't write the headline, but here's what
I
the
know.
headline.
I know.
Yeah, Senator Sullivan needs to pull his head out of the sand on climate change. Can you elaborate?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't have written that particular headline,
Yeah.
but it had to do with Senator Sullivan signing on with a caucus of senators that could best be described as climate change deniers, and there's a number of them. I think there's 30 or 38. I saw two different numbers on that. And I thought that was a mistake, and so the column had to do with what climate change is about and why I think we need to recognize it.
Well, let me
do something about it.
Let me try to frame the issue. So I think there's some things we probably agree on here. So the debate, as I see it, there's two facets to the debate. One, is the climate changing to the degree that it's warming? And then secondly, the second facet to the debate, which I think is more controversial, what role does man play in whether the climate's changing to the degree where it's warming? Are we on the same page there?
We are on the same page there. And then the third part of that is, if the second one, then what can we do about it?
Okay.
And that's pretty daunting.
Very good. Very good. So that'd be the third aspect. And that's really, I suppose, the most controversial.
Right.
Now, so I don't know that I've heard many people deny the first part, that the climate is changing and it is warming. I guess the one thing I would ask you, Professor, is that's you would acknowledge and stipulate that climates do change. That's what climates do. And if they do change, then the climates do change. And then they're warm and they cool, and they warm and they cool. So that's not unusual in and of itself, is it?
No, that's been demonstrated for years. That's what glaciers, of course, are all about. They're a good, they use the word proxy, record of glaciation. Climates get cooler, the glaciers expand, climates warm up, glaciers retract, and there's many other proxies as well, cores in the ocean, cores in the ice in Antarctica and Greenland and so on. So yeah, that record is pretty, well, let me say it's been studied a lot, and it's clear that climates change. Scientists, being scientists, will, of course, disagree and try to perfect that record. But yeah, we're on the same page there.
Now, as far as whether man is responsible and to what degree, you believe man plays a major role in climate change?
I believe that since the Industrial Revolution, the record shows that climates are warming much faster than they would based on that normal trajectory. So yes, they aren't the only factor, but they are a significant factor. Let's put it that way.
The main factor?
I don't know.
Okay, so that's
I mean, I don't know. I mean, we can't do anything about normal climate change, or what we'd call normal.
Because you hear these stories of volcanoes, cow flatulence, and some of these things that there's nothing man really could do about, right? So we don't know to what degree man's responsible, but in your opinion, it's a significant role to the point we should do something about it.
Right. The statistic I cited in the article, I didn't want to get into, you used to write for those columns as well. You get 700 words, and you squeeze in 730 if you can, so you can't cover everything.
Right.
But amount of carbon in the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere seems to be the critical one as far as the so-called greenhouse gases, and that's higher than it has been in the last 800,000 years. And of course, that's going back into the ice age. So, but it's higher than it would normally be, and we know we know the mechanism for how greenhouse gases, human caused, are produced.
We're talking to Professor Alan Morris, who is the professor of anthropology at Kenai Peninsula College, and he has a column in the Anchorage Daily News regarding climate change and Senator Sullivan's role in the issue. So let's take the third aspect of this debate and what should be done. What is it, in your opinion, the first thing we should do to address climate change as it relates to mankind?
Well, of course, the first thing is to acknowledge it and continue the science, of what's the cause. And second is looking at how we can reduce the production of greenhouse gases.
So specifically, give us some proposals.
I'm getting there. Yeah,
okay.
I'm getting there. So that's a global problem. I mean, that's but I think in Alaska we are in a good position to produce. So let me back up just a step. So what can we change? So we're not going to change how we're going to fuel airlines, for example. That can't be done by solar power or something like that. But we can change automotive power, and we can change the heating grid, and through different types of so-called alternative energy. And in Alaska, that means, in my opinion, that means tidal power and geothermal power.
Well,
we are right there for producing those two.
Well, let's look at mankind's role in producing greenhouse gases. What is it that mankind does that produces the most?
Yeah, burn fossil fuels.
Fossil fuels in the way of automobiles,
heating,
okay,
all of that.
Now, isn't it true, Professor, that we have really made some pretty significant progress when it comes to having cleaner burning automobiles?
Right.
Okay, so we've made some real progress there.
But I don't think it's. I mean, look at the iconic photos of Los Angeles and the freeways. We burn gas in cars more efficiently, but not to the extent that it's going to make a big dent. At least I don't think.
Now, my experience, because I go to LA a lot, and I've been there many years over the years, and I notice a major difference in the amount of smog now as opposed to the 80s and early 90s and even late 90s. I mean, a significant difference.
Right. Yep.
So that's good. That's a tangible improvement.
Absolutely. I'm on with that. I haven't been to Los Angeles many times. And try to avoid the place. But,
now, I've also been to China a number of times, and I find the complete opposite to be true. The last time I was in Beijing, policies that reduce greenhouse gases, and China and other countries don't care. What do you say to that?
Well, I'm not sure that China doesn't care. My understanding from what I've looked at is they have about half of China has taken, and I don't know why it's half, but about half of China has taken steps to try to reduce these greenhouse gases, and it's coal. They burn coal. The main thing is coal, and the United States too. I mean, we have significant coal generation for electricity, and the other, this way this framed it at about half of it. They just don't seem to care.
Well, Dr. Barstow, Professor, I want to take a quick break. I want to continue our discussion with you. It's very fascinating. I have a couple more questions along the lines of climate change and man's involvement, what we should do. Talking to Professor Alan Morris, professor at Kenai Peninsula College. Dan Fagan Show at 7:45. All right, 747 Dan Fagan Show. We're speaking with Professor Alan Boras, who's a professor of anthropology at Kenai Peninsula College. We're talking about climate change. He has a column in the Anchorage Daily News regarding Senator Sullivan and his approach to climate change. And I want to get to that in a minute too, Professor. But I just want to finish wrapping up kind of our generic discussion of climate change. So the major sin, if you will, of mankind when it comes to affecting greenhouse gases is burning fossil fuels, and that would be mostly automobiles. We've seen improvement there. The improvement in the cleaner burning cars came, as I understand it, through technology, not necessarily the government forcing the automobile manufacturers to do that. Is that not fair?
Certainly technology, but I think EPA, set some standards in the 80s, 90s for targeting gas mileage. So government was involved. But I don't, but it was also technology, and frankly, price of gas.
Yeah,
price of gas goes down. People buy big cars that because you can afford to put gas in the tank. I mean, just a couple of years ago, it was pretty astounding to go fill up your tank, and it's $70. Well,
yeah.
So yeah, it's complicated, but no question that gasoline engines are more efficient now, and cars are more efficient. They're lighter, all that stuff.
Should we get to a place, in your opinion, where we almost completely do away with fossil fuels?
I don't think we'll ever be there. No,
okay. But that's the goal?
I don't think so. We need to significantly reduce the major problem, and it's essentially heating and cooling in the southern states, and which we can do, and cars. Either very efficient cars, and there's some really efficient cars, but they're small, they're light,
So you think
good Alaskan cars?
You think the government should mandate that there should be laws passed that would outlaw the Cadillac Escalades and the Hummers and the big gas guzzlers?
I don't know. I think laws should. I think the role of government in this is to encourage research into forms of energy that are very efficient, relatively non-greenhouse gas producing, and let industry take it from there. But to encourage that kind of research, I mean, there's right now electric cars are they're sort of in a stage 2. The first ones were pretty abysmal, and now they're better, and they'll get better yet. There was one. Chevy's making one that supposedly is very efficient for places like Los Angeles, where where you can plug it in, drive your 20 miles to work, and plug it in when you get home. Now, Alaska, that's a little different thing. I live in Kasilof, I need something that's going to get me through the snow to get to school and so on. So I would be leery of blanket legislation that mandates things, but I think encouraging the research is a role government can do.
Yeah. Well, this is a real tough subject for me, in that I know there's a lot of people on both sides of the issue who have, frankly, very different facts. I see you present some bullet points here. For example, coastal native villages are falling into the ocean. Melting sea ice is no longer acts as a buffer. Dramatic increases in carbon dioxide, greenhouse gases absorbed in the North Pacific, intensifying acidification. Polar bears are migrating. Arctic ocean sea ice is melting. I understand that's one side of the story. There are other scientists who say, a completely different thing, that this is not as drastic as people on the other side would say. It's very difficult for me to be able to discern what's real and what's not, because the facts seem to be different on both sides of the issue. I'm gonna, as someone who you might characterize as a climate change denier, let me give you my side of this and where I'm coming from, and then I'd like for you to respond, if that would be okay.
Sure.
I have always noticed that there seems to be a movement in this on this planet that is always about one thing: centralizing power, taking wealth from the private sector, transferring it into the government sector, minimizing the freedom of the individual, intensifying and growing the freedom of the government. That is a movement that I could take down the line and go, well, here's an example of it, here's an example of it, here's an example of it, here's an example of it. The people who typically are promoting the centralizing of power and the taking away of the individual freedom are the same people promoting the global warming, climate change movement. That's my main reason for being skeptical. And I understand you would say, well, that's a pretty weak argument. I agree. I can't sit here and get into the muddy, into the minutia of this. Well, this is what this scientist says, and here's what this fact is. But the global warming, climate change crowd, if you will, typically are always on the side of centralizing power and reducing individual freedom. Is that a fair position?
I think it's more complex than that. There's that crowd, will say, also includes people who are at the other end of the pole, who want to get off the grid, who don't want any control, who want their own little whatever solar powered windmill, and want to get off the centralized system, grow a lot of their own food, all of that sort of thing. So, there is the group that you talk about, yeah, for sure. But the group, there's a lot of variation in the whole thing. And really, it's just to step back just a little bit. The biggest issue is there's too many people in this world. Too many people. The population is just going out of sight. Back to that image of Los Angeles, or you've been to China. You probably know it better than I. And they all need to consume power. And as we create this drive toward modernization, the power thirst goes up, and how are we going to satisfy that? So that to me is the fundamental problem. Now, that is a big one, because it is really hard to figure out how we can do anything about worldwide overpopulation. And if we can decrease the population, centralized control or not, whatever, we'll solve a lot of the energy problem. But
we're talking to Professor Alan Boras, who is with the Kenai Peninsula College. He is the professor of anthropology there. And that does seem to be where the climate change movement is focusing, is population control. Do you agree with the policy in China, the one-child policy?
They still have that?
Yes, they do.
Huh?
Yes, they do.
From our standpoint, it's a good policy, and it's also probably an economic policy there, because they're recognizing only so many resources, and the more people you have, the more dispersed those resources are.
So, Professor, if a young couple has a baby and become pregnant again, you think it's a good policy for the government to say you have to pay a year's salary and taxes, or you're going to have to abort your second child? You think that's a good policy?
I think a better policy is education. And there's certain religions, for example, that promote having a lot of babies, having a lot of kids. And there's certain cultural practices that promote having a lot of kids. Well, we can't afford that in this world. So I'd start there, personally. I'd start with that sort of ideology of procreation, if you will.
Well, do you think China should continue its one-child policy?
I don't know. I don't know, because
forcing parents to have an abortion.
Well,
you think that's justifiable?
I don't know that they do that.
Well,
I'll have to take your word for it. So that's why I don't know. I haven't looked at that for years. I didn't even know they were still doing that. So I don't think forcing anyone to have an abortion is a good idea.
Well, that's the policy. It's at the point where you cannot afford. You just can't afford to pay the tax. So that's
so it's indirect. So they tax them. They don't force them
to have an abortion. Salary.
they force it through a tax.
Yeah, but it's a year's salary. No one
Yeah.
has that over there.
Well, my guess is that's meant to be to cause people not to have that second child. That's
But sometimes you just get pregnant. You know that.
Yeah, I know that. Yes.
And you don't think that should be? You don't think that's an abhorrent,
Well,
disgusting policy?
Let's. The policy is apparently from you that is the tax. What people do about it, yeah, probably would force people. So that's
And you think that should be changed?
The tax should be changed.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is it working? Is the population going down?
Well,
I don't know.
The parents
And
are
how many?
losing their
And
children.
the other issue then is how many abortions are there as a result of that?
Well,
we're getting pretty far afield.
Even if there's just one, I mean, forcing a parent to to abort their child.
We're forcing a parent to pay a tax.
All right, Professor.
I don't know the result of that.
Well, unfortunately, I'm out of time, but I do appreciate your time, Professor Alan Boras, anthropology at Kenai Peninsula College, 758, Dan Fagan Show. 6 minutes past 8 o'clock. Dan Fagan Show on KOIN, KVNT, streaming live, danfagan.us. Our telephone number, 569-1080. 569-1080. We're streaming, again, danfagan.us. Our good friends, Keith Montanok, Specialty Truck and Auto, also founder of the Combat Fishing Tournament, put on every year. And then Buddy Witt, who is the executive director of the Armed Services YMCA.
Yeah, that's correct.
And he is a Texas A&M alum.
We don't say that too loud around here because the LSU stuff starts flying from the other side of the table.
Well, you guys are now SEC, so you're a brotherhood of some degree. You joined the club.
You'll say that until we finally beat you, and then it probably changes.
Have you since you've been in the SEC?
In football? No.
No.
That's going to change next year.
We'll see. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
It's good to be here.
I asked Keith this, and you learned something. Let me tell you about Keith Montanok. Keith Montanok, he's like an onion. You peel things away, and you learn new things about him all the time, and they're usually really impressive. I learned something unimpressive about him. It was last week. I was talking to him. By the way, Keith Montanok's the only only human being that I know that I can call at 5:30 in the morning, and he'll take my call because he gets to work what time do you get to work usually?
By 5:30, he's been working for like 3 hours
Probably.
or something.
I'm usually there by 4:30.
But it's nice to be driving to work, and you want to make a call, and you got no one to call. I like to talk when I drive. I don't want you to drive. So I'll call Keith, and I call Keith up, and usually, it's a short conversation, but I wanted to get his take on American Sniper. And I found out about him. This would be one of the unflattering things, that he's a germaphobe. So he won't go to a movie theater. I said, if you find a place where, this is a direct quote, if you find a place where it's showing in a brand new theater, then I'd go see it.
I can't go in there.
The
floor is sticky. The seats are sticky.
Well, I can understand an adult movie theater.
No.
I wouldn't go into one of those with one of those suits they put on. But like a regular theater where they're eating popcorn and drinking Dr. Pepper.
I used to force myself when my daughter thought she had to go, but I've got her to see the world my way.
Well, you go to Aces games,
and then any you fix cars. You get grease and dirt all over you all the time, right?
Well, he has
grease and dirt is
that's
fine.
true.
I can handle grease and dirt. I can't handle
Other
other
things.
people's
what?
excretions.
Well, you think people don't using the restroom in the seat? You think they're relieving themselves?
Well, how do the armrests get sticky? I mean, what's on there?
The soda. They're eating.
I don't want soda on there.
What about Aces games? You go to the Sullivan.
Boy. Wow.
You didn't know you could come in here for a grilling.
Where I sit, the seats are not sticky.
Okay, so you have your own seats there that you own, probably.
No, I'll
ask
the seats
you,
aren't sticky,
buddy, because
Okay.
Keith's heart for the veterans is so. I mean, he lives for the veterans. Is that a fair statement? I've never met anybody.
That's a fair understatement.
Never met anybody who cares about our veterans like Keith, and not just in word.
Mm-hmm.
It's his life. He walks it out more than anybody I've ever seen.
There's a quote I like, and I think Keith fits it to a T. Is that it's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't look to get recognition for it.
That's right, and that is Keith in a nutshell. Yeah. Absolutely.
And he's blushing now, but
so I'll ask you: have you seen American Sniper?
I have not.
Oh my!
I haven't seen it yet. It's on my list of things. Just haven't had a chance yet.
Well,
but I'm familiar with the story.
The Hollywood left; they hate it.
That's okay. That tells me it must be a good movie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Michael Moore, of course, his famous quote is that, "Well, why would I go see a movie about a sniper? Snipers are cowards; they shoot people in the back."
Yeah. When was the last time he put out a movie?
Yeah.
When was the last time he put out a movie that anybody saw?
Yeah.
If you're referring, that just kind of the fact of the matter is, if anyone is going to look me in the eye and with a straight face tell me that any member of our military is a coward, I completely would shut off and not take anything else they have to say.
Well, let me tell you
credibility.
Let me tell you what I liked about the movie that it was so different than most Hollywood movies on our military. Most movies today, that when they talk about our military, the underlying premise is that the soldiers, the men and women who go to combat, regret the violence they were a part of, that they can't live with it, they're ashamed of it. And this movie, which focused on Chris Kyle, the sniper, the theme that I got from it, and it was toward the end of the movie when he's meeting with a psychologist because people were worried about him because he was involved in so many kills. The psychologist says, there's some things over there you did that you regret or something. That's the paraphrase. And he says, and you could just see it in his face. It was a great acting job by Bradley Cooper. He said, "No, I will answer to my creator for every kill I had. My regret is that I couldn't have saved more." And that was the story. You have nothing to be ashamed of for being in combat, taking another life, because the life you took saved many, many more. Not to mention the many, many, many thousands you would have saved had that terrorist come over here. And that was the story. You have nothing to be ashamed of. There are no regrets. You have nothing but to be proud of what you did over there. That's why I love the movie. And I'm assuming that's why the left absolutely hates it.
It's probably that and a culmination of other things. They're fully invested in the anti-war mantra. And to them, there is no separation between policy and action. There's no separation between policy and the tools that are used by those in power to fulfill that policy.
Yeah.
I could be opposed to some policy that our current president has put in place that takes men and women from our military and puts them in harm's way. But I will never not stand behind our men and women in the military and their obligation to fulfill their oath and follow their order and do what they're supposed to do. And for many on the other side of the fence from us, they don't separate those two things.
Yeah.
They look at the action, and those who fulfill the action is so ingrained into policy in their minds that they can't separate the two. So when they are against the policy of going to war in Iraq, Afghanistan, for some of them, a lot of them, and I'm talking about the far left movement, look at that the same, and they can't separate it. And for them to look at the story of Chris Kyle and others who served their country honorably and did some mighty, mighty impressive things during the course of their service, and to give that any type of credibility or instill in that any type of honor on their part would be to, and somehow in their mind, to say that the policy itself was okay.
Buddy Witt is the executive director of the Armed Services YMCA. Keith Montanak, founder of the Armed Services Combat Fishing Tournament. We're going to continue talking with Buddy and Keith in a minute. It's the Dan Fagan Show, time 8:15. 8:17 in the morning, 569-1080. I want to remind you about our good friends Mike Daniels over at Country Financial. Country Financial has been helping Alaskans with their financial planning for a long time. They have 13 locations in Alaska, 5 in Anchorage, 5 in the Valley. Here's what happens when you sit down with a country representative, 10 minutes with just sit down with them for 10 minutes, you're going to realize, wow, there's so much that I needed to know about financial planning, getting to a worry-free retirement, making sure I have adequate insurance. All matters financial. You'll be thrilled that you gave them a call and set up an appointment. It won't cost you a dime to do so. Mike Daniels and his team at Country Financial. Here's the number, 866-COUNTRY, 866-COUNTRY. Mike Daniels, Country Financial. Our time, 8:18, we're talking to Buddy Witt, who's the executive director of the Armed Services YMCA, Keith Montauk, owner of Specialty Truck and Auto, but more importantly, founder of the Combat Fishing Tournament. What's coming up? You got a big event coming up?
We do indeed. The 38th annual Salute to the Military. And that will be on February the 13th at the Eagle Center.
38th annual.
38th.
This is something the Armed Services YMCA has been doing for 38 years.
That's correct. Started back in 1977. And really how it began was there were a lot of different organizations in the Anchorage community that were doing their own military appreciation type of event. And I don't know, we might have some old timers out there who are more seasoned folks who can give a better history of it. But my understanding from research is that a bunch of them came together and they said, instead of having a bunch of different military appreciation events, let's just have one. Everybody pool their resources, have one. And that happened in 1977. Senator Ted Stevens gave the speech that night, and it's been going ever since, every year. And
where's it held?
It's being held at the Egan Center. And the purpose of this event is to show the community, to show some appreciation for our military. At the same time, we present awards to the 12 junior enlisted military personnel of the year. We work with every branch of the armed services in Alaska, including Guard and Reserve, and we'll identify 12 individuals who have been recognized as the outstanding junior enlisted person for the last calendar year. And we recognize them. We present them with an award. We show our appreciation, and we work with a lot of local businesses, community leaders to put this thing on, and it's a huge event.
And people can come.
Anybody can come.
And
Absolutely.
How do they get tickets? How does that work?
If they go to our website, which is www.armedsservicesymca.org/Alaska, they can get them right there.
Keith has invited me, and he would not let me pay for my ticket.
Well, that was very kind of him.
I'm looking forward to it. I've never been. I can't believe 38 years I've never been to one of these.
Why not?
Where you been?
I don't know. I guess.
Well, you got to come this year.
Seeing movies in sticky theaters.
You know, when Senator Stevens lost re-election, Senator Murkowski took over as our honorary chairperson. Okay. So we work with her and her office and her staff to secure a guest speaker for the event. This year, it is Admiral Bill Gortney, who is the commander of U.S. Northern Command and NORAD.
Yeah,
he's making a trip up to speak to our group.
That's great. Well, what a great treat that'll be. Keith, how's the Combat Fishing Tournament coming along? What's your next event along those lines?
Well, we have an auction in March. I believe it's in March. We're still putting the details together on that. So when we know exactly when that date and time is and where the venue's at, we'll keep you posted. But that'll be the next event. That's where we raise about half the money we need to put this thing on. So we're always looking to change it up, find a way to get more people there. We auction off boat seats is one of the things we do at that event, so you can get an opportunity to go out fishing with the guys for the day. A lot of times people will...
And for those who don't know, most do, the Combat Fishing Tournament is an event. It's a one-day event in which You take how many?
Well, we can take
Approximately.
we've taken upwards of 300 guys.
You can put them on a bus.
Somewhere between 200 and 300. We get them on a bus about 1 o'clock in the morning out of Anchorage.
Combat folks will typically.
Junior enlisted is what we try to do.
Enlisted.
E1s through E5s is what we shoot for.
Take them on a bus down to Seward.
Get them on a nice bus. Take them down to Seward. Put a little breakfast in their bellies. Get down there. We serve them some nice fancy coffee while they're going through registration and some donuts and
fish all day.
Get them on the boats. They have
cost.
They have no cost. There's a small registration fee. They got to obviously buy a fishing license, and we get them a halibut derby ticket with part of their registration fee. They get lunch on the boat.
Right.
And when they come back in, I'll weigh their fish for them, and then we get them over to the cruise ship terminal, have a big banquet for them, and have them back home by midnight.
What a day. And it's such a treat for them. You've been doing this how many years?
I believe this is year 9.
9th year.
Yep.
And so you were saying about the auction coming up in March. You will actually auction off seats with the troops.
So you can, as a civilian, you can buy a seat on one of these boats and go out fishing with these guys and hear some of their stories and get to meet them and get to know them. It's, and oftentimes what happens is somebody will come down and pay a lot of money for the boat seat and then just donate it back in their name to put another enlisted person on there. That's great, but people should never feel obligated to do that. If they bought the seat and they want to go fishing, they sure ought to go. But it's a great event, and I would say 3/4 of these guys that show up on the docks that morning have no idea what they're getting themselves into. Probably 1/4 of them regret ever getting on the boat. But a lot of them have never been on a saltwater boat in their life. Some of them have never been fishing in their lives.
Right.
They just really have no idea what they're getting themselves into, and lots of big smiles at 6 o'clock when they're showing up. Lots of great stories. Lots of emotion. The banquet is my favorite part of the whole event.
And the thing that is so meaningful to men and women, right?
Yep.
Who go out on this, it's that people care, that people appreciate and acknowledge their sacrifice. That's what really means. It's the presence and the fishing. That's all nice, and they feel special. But the fact that so many have done so much work just to say, man, we really appreciate you guys.
I mean, obviously what we're trying to accomplish by doing it is to make sure they know that that the people of Alaska are behind them.
Yes.
We care. We want to do whatever we can do to help out. We want to make sure they know they're appreciated. The fishing's just kind of a byproduct of it. If the fishing is a nice way to pull all that together, it gets the Seward Charter Association involved, and they've been, obviously without them, we couldn't do it at all. But they really bang it up big. Bob Kondopoulos with Saltwater Safaris was
another founder.
He helped me when we put this thing all together in the beginning years ago. Since then, we've turned it over. It's actually a program of the Armed Services YMCA of Alaska now. But yeah, Bob and I had an idea, nearly 10 years ago, and we had no idea it would ever turn into what it's turned into, but it's turned into something great.
Right.
Bob and I are very proud of it. But we got to give credit where credit is due, and the Armed Services YMCA of Alaska puts in the bulk of the work.
Yeah.
The stuff that goes on behind the scenes is mind-boggling, the amount of work it takes to put it together.
Well, it's great. It's a great thing. I just think it's one of the greatest things I've ever heard of. Just the fact that this day set aside, and I'm sure that now, for me personally, if you were to give me, say, all right, Dan, you have 3 choices. One, you could do nothing but listen to Nancy Pelosi speeches for a year. You could go into solitary confinement in jail for a month, or you can go do 7 hours deep sea fishing. I'd really have to think about those 3 options because my worst days ever has been on a charter boat going up and down, puking up my guts. But, for the troops, I know they really enjoy it.
Oh, yeah. They have a great time.
They have a good time.
And I'll add, we do try to target junior enlisted who have just either returned from deployment or are set to go out on deployment. And we try to verify that. And it's a way to, listen, junior enlisted folks, they don't make a whole lot of money.
No, they don't.
And when you get up here to Alaska and see the beauty around you, and there's only so much you can do on a limited income.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that Keith and Bob when they founded this thing was, these guys are going out and risking their lives for us. They get back to Alaska and they don't have the means to go out and do some of the amazing things that you can do in Alaska. Let's appreciate them, but also put them in a setting and an environment we can say, this is what you're fighting for.
I hope, after 9/11, we all began to realize how important our military was because we were under attack. I hope that doesn't wane off. I hope that doesn't diminish. I hope we keep that alive in our hearts. That everything we have today is because of these guys. Every freedom we have.
Absolutely. And I'll say this. My understanding, this kind of brings us back around to the Salute to the Military event and the appreciation event. In 1977, when this thing was founded, this started, one of the reasons they wanted to make this large event was because we had just gotten out of the Vietnam War. And the military was not viewed upon in the highest of lights because of popular opinion and media and whatever else. And the idea was, let's make an event where we can once again focus on the sacrifices of our military, and we can focus on how much we appreciate and thank them for what they do. And events like the combat fishing tournament, the Salute to the Military event, all those, here we are 38 years later, and we're still doing it, and it's just as important, if not more important today as it was then.
Well, you two are playing a lot in keeping that spirit alive. We appreciate both of you. Thanks so much. Buddy Witt, Executive Director, Armed Services YMCA. The event again?
February 13th, Egan Center. You can go to
Center.
armedservices.com, armedservicesymca.com to get tickets.
To get a ticket, and I hope that we get a big turnout for that. Keith Montanak, a combat fishing tournament founder and Specialty Truck and Auto. Great seeing you again.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming by.
Thank you.
And I'd say thanks for getting up early. I'm assuming you're probably an early morning riser anyway, don't you?
Somewhat.
Yeah. All right, we'll take a quick break. Dan Fagan Show, broadcasting on KOAN 95.1 FM, 1080 AM. Also out in the Valley, 95.2 FM, 1020 AM. Streaming live, danfagan.us. Again, our number, 569-1080, 569-1080. The time currently, 8:30. 8:35 in the morning, Dan Fagan Show, broadcasting on KOAN in Anchorage, KVNT out in the Valley. Our number, 569-1080, 569-1080. We're also streaming live, audio and video on the internet, danfagan.us. Happy to welcome to the broadcast Jim Plaquet, who is a 40-year member of the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 302. He lives in Fairbanks. Jim, welcome to the program.
Yeah, good morning, Dan. From a chilly Fairbanks, we got minus 40 here this morning at the house.
Holy
so
smokes.
I'm burning about 7 gallons a day.
40 below.
Even at $3 a gallon heating oil.
What's that going to cost you just this month, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, at $3 at 7, we've had a mild winter up till now.
Yeah.
But my fuel bill and electric bill runs about $5,000 a year.
That is amazing.
So our population is declining. A lot of our kids are leaving and moving to Anchorage because you guys have cheap energy down there. And Fairbanks is kind of a dying town right now. That's why ANWR is so important.
Oh, so huge.
That we put more oil in the pipeline.
Yeah.
So we can keep our kids here. It's all about the kids. It's all about the future. You know, I'm 60 years old, but the kids are the ones that are hurting.
Well, you wrote a column. Was it yesterday? Yeah, it was yesterday. I thought it was very well written about Mr. Obama and his placating to the extremists instead of reason.
Look at everything he's done to Alaska.
Yeah,
he's killed the Pebble mine. He's killed Bristol Bay drilling. He's locked up half of the National Petroleum Reserve, and now ANWR. What's next? What's next?
Governor Walker he said he's declared war on our future.
Well, yeah.
Senator
Ted Stevens would be rolling in his grave right now.
Right.
I mean, Ted made a pact with the federal government that little sliver of land in ANWR that's left was supposed to be for Alaska's future economic development.
Yes.
It was for Alaska's future.
Yes.
And they've completely forgot about our state packhood.
Yep.
Completely forgot about it.
Well, it's a betrayal. It's not living up to your commitment. And it was like you say, it was an agreement. It was a compact. It was a covenant, if you will. And the federal government has just violated it over and over and over.
Yeah. I mean, they want to make us a big part. They don't want anybody to live here.
No. So what can we do, Jim? What can the average Alaska citizen do?
Well, if he knows people on the East, if they have relatives, they need to talk to their relatives. They need to explain the situation in Alaska, how much federal land is already locked up. I mean, we have 50 million acres already locked up in Alaska. I mean, that was the reason why we decided to be a state, because we're a resource state.
Yeah.
That's the only thing we have.
That's right. Well, that was the whole agreement. They would allow us to become a state, but the agreement is they didn't want us to be dependent on federal dollars. And we said, yes, we don't want to be dependent on federal dollars. The agreement is we get our 100 million acres, and then the federal land, whatever's developed there, we get a percentage of that. And it just does not live. The feds have just time and time again not lived up to that.
No.
So should we? And I know times are kind of tough, Jim. Talking to Jim Plaquet, who wrote a column in the Anchorage Daily News about Mr. Obama's decision to ask Congress to declare more of ANWR a wilderness area. Is it time that the state begin to take a proactive stance? Because you mentioned having people contact their friends and their neighbors in the lower 48. Do we need to start to launch some kind of national campaign and try to explain to people what's happening up here in Alaska and how we're really held hostage by the federal government by locking up so many of our lands?
Yeah, I think it's a travesty that the state used to give Arctic Power money to run our campaign.
Yeah. And
then all of a sudden we got complacent. We quit giving money to Arctic Power.
Yeah.
And now we're in the situation we are now.
Well, I mean, the national media is not going to tell our story.
No. No, they want to lock everything up here.
Well,
They don't think people have to work. I mean,
is it fair, Jim, to say that the other side of this story is we're not that far from seeing Anwar open? Because let's think about it for a minute. We've got the Republicans in control of the Senate and the House. Assuming we get a pro-development, pro-Anwar development president in 2 years,
mhm.
I think we got a pretty good shot of getting this thing open for development. What do you think?
Well, we were close before. We
I
had
know.
the Senate and the House, and then Clinton vetoed it.
Yep.
We were close. I mean,
And we were close with Bush. Ted Stevens really came within a vote
right.
of getting it passed, and of course, Mr. Bush would have signed it. So yeah,
Right.
but
Right.
it seems like we're at that place again where we can actually make this thing happen. What do you
Right.
think?
Well, yeah. I mean, all we need to do is elect a pro-development president,
Yeah,
and we've got it.
yeah. Well, I hope so. And like you say, what you guys experience in Fairbanks, I can't imagine.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I feel so sorry for the kids. I mean, it's a dying town. We don't want to. I don't want to leave this legacy
Yeah.
that we let Fairbanks die. We let Alaska die.
Will
the
a gas pipeline?
Oh,
help?
that's our Fairbanks is only hope to get
Yeah.
cheap natural gas, cheap
Yeah.
energy.
So are
It's
you
the-
optimistic we're going to get that, and that's going to bring?
Well, I hope our new governor
Yeah.
keeps pushing forward. I would hate the big gas line to be killed because of the state and not the economics of it.
Yeah.
Time will tell, but I hope this governor would push forward and meet all the gates he needs to meet to keep this thing going.
Yeah.
I mean, he's made a few things that in question, but I don't want the state to kill the gas line. I'd rather the economics not be there
Right.
that kills it, not the state.
We're talking to Jim Plaquet. Jim, I have some breaking news for you, and you'll hear it first here, and I'll let you respond to it. This just out of Washington, D.C. The Obama administration has just announced that it is moving to block development in 9.8 million acres within the Beaufort and Chukchi Seas as a part of a new 5-year Outer Continental Shelf oil and gas leasing program. The draft was just released minutes ago by the Department of Interior. Basically, he's shutting down offshore drilling, which includes potential 14 lease sales, 3 of which are in the Alaska region. The White House released maps of the Beaufort and Chukchi showing the areas. According to the Department of Interior, 4 of the 5 areas off limits in the current draft were also off limits in the previous 5-year plan. The 5th area is in the Chukchi Sea. Again, more bad news from the Obama administration. You got a thought on this?
No, it's federal overreach on steroids.
Well, we need a new president, 'cause
Yeah.
we get a new president.
Simple.
He can reverse all this. And I'll tell you, I hope we get it. 'Cause, we need a new president, not just here in Alaska. I think there's probably a lot of things that this president has done to our nation that needs to be reversed. So,
Well, I think people need to go to the federal building and show their disbelief.
yeah. Well,
Anyway,
Jim, I appreciate you giving us your time. I really appreciate
You bet.
your column in the paper regarding the Obama administration and Anwar. Thank you so much.
Bernadette, appreciate it,
to us.
Dan. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.
All right, Jim. You too. Thank you. 9.8 million acres, Chukchi and Beaufort off. You remember Mark Begich? He said he was going to get us offshore drilling. I guess since we didn't reelect him, that's our punishment. That's all right. Another president can reverse it. I wouldn't get too worried about it. This is Mr. Obama just saying to his environmentalist friends, look, I love the environment too. That's my legacy. 8:44 is the time. Dan Fagan Show. 847 Dan Fagan Show, KOAN, KVNT, 95.1 FM in Anchorage, 1080 AM in Anchorage, 95.2 FM in the Valley, 1020 AM in the Valley. Our number 569-1080. We're streaming live, danfagan.us. Some major breaking news now out of Washington, D.C. The Obama administration has announced that it is moving to block development in 9 million acres within the Beaufort and Chukchi Sea. This is a part of a new 5-year Outer Continental Shelf oil and gas leasing program. This has just been released this morning by the Department of Interior. This will include 14 potential lease sales. Everything this administration does, everything without exception, everything, no exception, this administration does is designed to hurt the economy. There are no exceptions. Whether it's heavy regulations, high taxes, anti-business policies, whether it's the EPA, the Army Corps of Engineers, doesn't matter which agency we're talking about. It's all designed to suck the life out of the economy, period. And we only got 2 years left of this guy. Now, here's the good news. Mr. Obama can make his executive order, take all this off limits, and then a new president can come back in and reverse it. So let not your heart be troubled. This is Mr. Obama trying to set up his legacy as the most far left president in the history of mankind. Now, you remember Mark Begich told us 6 years ago that he would get us offshore drilling because he'd have a seat at the table. Well, he had a seat at the table for 6 years. We booted his ass to the curb, and now I guess our punishment is the offshore drilling that Mr. Begich was supposed to make happen. This president is moving to try to make sure it does not happen in the future. You'll notice yesterday when Mr. Obama announced that he was going to expand the area declared as wilderness in Anwar, that Mark Begich said that had we not booted him out of office, it might not have happened. He presented himself as a firewall between the president and this action. Now, let's think about that for a minute. So what Mr. Begich is saying to you is that Mr. Obama is coming after Alaska now because he's no longer there. He being Mr. Begich. Now let's think about that. Let's process that. Process that with me. Begich is telling you the leader of his party, the guy he voted for twice, is now attacking Alaska for purely political reasons. That is precisely what Mark Begich is saying. That's his party, the leader of his party, the guy he voted for twice. Because Begich is no longer there, Obama is attacking Alaska for political gain. I don't think I'm exaggerating that. 569-1080. 569-1080. Love to get your thoughts. Give us a call. 569-1080. Michael.
Yes, sir.
How are you, sir?
I got to tell you, your analysis is dead on. But the deception of the left will prevail. I guarantee it. It's sad to even say something like that, but if you even look at the way the governor race was handled, I mean, that guy was elected to straighten out the National Guard. Give him a break. I mean, there's nothing going to happen with that pipeline now. He's already fired everybody who has spent countless hours.
You talking about the gas line in Bill Walker?
Yes, Bill Walker, yes. And the deception of the left, I don't understand it. Being from Valdez, knowing Mr. Walker for several years, I can tell you, I just don't like it. Alaska is not looking good. And I hate to say this, as being a diehard conservative, there's no doubt in my mind that Hillary's going to win the next election.
Oh,
and that's going to piss so many people off, but I can tell you.
But Michael, this president has been such a dismal failure. He's worse than Jimmy Carter, and Jimmy Carter gave us Reagan. Don't you think the fact that he's such a disaster that the people of America have said enough with leftism?
Enough, yes, exactly.
But you say Hillary's going to win.
But look at the victories of the left. I mean, look in the past. I mean, look at how well the campaign's going against shutting down the gold mine in Alaska. You know, it's all propaganda, and they just fuel it all with fear, and it works. Even conservatives, I hear conservatives all the time talking, smack about conservatives. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen, and people buy into it like you wouldn't believe. I mean, what is your feeling? I mean, Alaska, the caller that you had on Alaska is heading downhill. I mean, we got all these oil issues right now. Why can't we be, bringing in revenue with this gold mine?
Yeah.
Seriously.
You're talking about Pebble now.
Pebble, yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, I agree with you, but I remain optimistic, and I'll tell you that what's at the core of my optimism, Michael, is I just believe truth will prevail. I just believe so strongly in the concept that people will gravitate to truth if they're allowed to hear it, and we are making great strides, those of us in the conservative movement, in reaching more people. It used to be that the media controlled the dissemination of information, and people they had no idea what the other side of the story is. That's changing, and I think for that reason and that reason alone, we're going to see a major shift in this country away from leftism.
I would like to hope so, but I think there's got to be a catastrophic event happen before people really start to understand, and that catastrophic event is the economy. Period.
Well, that may be what happens. It could be. You're right. Thank you, Michael.
All right.
Appreciate your call. Look, if you look at the policies of this government, especially this particular president, even President Bush, with the money he spent domestically, we can't continue this path. When Michael talks about the deception of the left and how that it always wins, or it wins a lot, what causes it to win is when people fall for it. If you agree with it and you believe it, then the consequences will follow. I agree. And if Governor Walker is really is going to kill the gas pipeline because he wants the unions to be involved and he wants the state to control everything and he wants the private sector to have nothing to do with it, then yeah, that will be a disaster, and it'll be our own fault because we voted for him, because we were fooled by Alice Rogoff of the Alaska Dispatch, who told us every day Sean Parnell doesn't care about women being raped. So yeah, we own that, and we've messed up. But I don't know that that's the case. I still have hope that Mr. Walker will do the right thing, will allow the work that we've done as a state to bring this pipeline online. He'll continue it. He won't try to block it or kill it. The people that he's putting in there makes you think that he is trying to kill it, but I'm going to remain hopeful. And hopefully Mr. Walker at the end will do the right thing. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong.